So the first plenary speaker for our conference is Professor Dart Neuman. Once again, I welcome you, Professor Dart. Let me introduce him quickly. Professor Dart Neuman, an ethnomusicologist and academic leader, is currently serving as Associate Campus Provost at the University of California, Santa Cruz. Since joining UCSC in 2005, he has held the Kamil and Talat Hassan Andot Chair in Classical Indian Music, where he blends administrative oversight with deep artistic and scholarly expertise. His research focuses on the social history and transmission of Hindustani music in the 20th century, notably explored in his book, A House of Music, The Hindustani Musician and the Crafting of Tradition. His notable projects include interactive digital transcription and analysis platform supported by the Arts Research Institute. This open source tool allows for the transcription and analysis of oral melodic traditions that do not fit standard Western staff notation. His work continues to bridge the gap between traditional South Asian musical performances and modern technological analysis. He co-founded and co-directed Center for South Asian Studies at UCSC, fostering interdisciplinary research and public engagement. So without any further ado, I would now like to invite him to kindly deliver his presentation. Professor Dart Neuman.
Many thank you. And it's a real distinct honor to be invited here. And I also want to say it's a pleasure and a little bit of embarrassment to be here with my father as a discussant. We spoke this together, and it's actually a wonderful convergence of Khandani father-son performance, as well as Gharanedar activity with my Guru Bhai Stefan through Bruno. So we're hoping that this somewhat unusual configuration actually is native to the worlds we're talking about. So again, really honored to be invited to speak, and let's see if I can actually get this going. As scholars, we tend to recognize theory most readily when it takes textual form. This paper shifts that frame by examining what I call oral scholasticism, a form of aesthetic research undertaken by professional musicians through pedagogy, practice, performance, and speech. By oral scholasticism, I do not mean an implicit theory underlying performance, nor do I mean that musicians are allergic to or ignorant of the written word. Rather, I refer to research that musicians conduct through sound as it unfolds in real time. From this perspective, performance is not evidence of theory, it is a site of theorizing. So I'll trace this activity across two archives: the early 20th All India Music Conferences and mid-20th century oral archives. What both reveal are not fragments of a lost system, but living, dynamic, plural epistemologies, researched and at times argued in sound. More broadly, I want to offer a methodological invitation to treat the oral archive of Hindustani music as a field of inquiry. Thousands of hours of performance from 1903 to the present are now digitally and publicly available, from commercial, studio, field, and live recordings. Taken together, these materials open multiple horizons, each requiring its own forms of rigor to do justice to the wonderful music we all inhabit and enjoy. This leads to a second layer of this paper that my project seeks to unwind, which we heard discussed just a little bit ago. There's been a persistent misalignment between the music we study and the tools we use to analyze it. Not simply because music is oral, but because our methods of inscription and transcription were not designed to engage it, whether in sargams, staff, spectrograms, or melographs. This declaration rests on a simpler proposition. We apprehend and calibrate the kinds of melodic movements central to Hindustani music, as well as other melismatically rich traditions, simply more efficiently through oral and embodied practice than through existing graphic systems of inscription. And here's my hubris, at least until now. So alongside this argument, I want to introduce a platform I've been developing over the last 15 years, the Interactive Digital Transcription and Analysis Platform, or the IDTAP. This is an open source platform for transcribing and analyzing Hindustani performance in ways that are native to its movements in terms of articulation. I'll return to this, but I just want to advertise it. It's public, it's available, you can all use it. So I want to begin with the All India Music Conferences, because it's here that we see oral and written epistemologies converge and collide in public. The inaugural 1916 gathering brought scholars, musicians, and patrons together under a national framework. Among the many debates, one issue stood out as particularly divisive for everyone except the musicians. And this is the topic, of course, of Shrutis. Not an ostensibly fractious subject, factions nevertheless formed. At the conference, talks were interrupted and interruptions were reprimanded. Victories were declared and defeats were contested. So contentious was the topic that a standing committee was formed, only to conclude that the matter needed to be deferred. What then of the musicians? Often cast as illiterate interlocutors, they were brought back to the podium, not just as performers, but as arbiters. On one occasion, the eminent singer Zakiruddin Khan took the stage with the colonial judge E. Clements to test his Shruti harmonium, an instrument he designed to intone the 22 Shrutis described in the Shastras. What followed was a defeat of such epic proportions that it was remembered in oral histories and ceremoniously recounted in written accounts. After 2 hours of trial and discussion, the conference concluded that the scales produced by the instrument did not match those sung by the musician. But what matters for our purposes is not the outcome, not the defeat, but its implication. Zakiruddin did not reject Shrutis, nor inquiry into them. Rather, he relocated the site of knowledge, from calibrated instrument to voice, hand, and ear. This point is reinforced by the Binkar Musharraf Khan of Alwar. The minutes record him engaging classical theory, yet concluding that the precise location of Shrutis was difficult to determine, and that for practical purposes, describing rags in terms of the 12 tones was adequate. The other musicians were asked, and they concurred. But I want to say this was not a retreat from Shrutis, but a shift in how musical knowledge is understood, researched, and represented. This becomes clear during the second to fourth All India Music Conferences. By this time, debates about Shrutis had been effectively banned, and attention shifted to rag families, what the minutes translate as rag varieties. For musicologists, this was a safe shift. For musicians, Shrutis and rag varieties were integrated domains. Across multiple pages, we find detailed descriptions of rags within the Malhar, Tori, Kannada, Bilaval, and Sarang families. What is important is that these were described, debated, and presented by hereditary musicians, not just musicologists. Which raises the question, what were these varieties? Ungs, prakars, an older kind of tat? We cannot fully know, but it's important to note that these discussions took place prior to the formalization of Bhatkande's tat system, which he unveiled during the second All India Music Conference. What we do see, however, is sustained engagement by musicians with song texts and theoretical concepts, arohi, avrohi, swara usage, andolans, and pakars. Some of these descriptions appear unusual to us. Jaunpuri is listed as a tori, Bhageshwari is expressed both nishads, but that's precisely the point. We are encountering a dynamic tradition, and what is present here can be read as a mode of reasoning grounded in relation. Rags linked through shared features and differentiated through movement, emphasis, and usage. But we fully recognize this only when we move from the written to the oral archive. not to reconstruct what these musicians meant back then, but to hear what this mode of reasoning becomes in sound within a different epistemic and medial framework. To do so, we need methods of transcription that can engage musical thought as it unfolds. So let me start with a brief description of the transcription problem that many of us know. On the one side, when we turn to conventional systems like staff notation, MIDI, and other quantized representations, we get too little information. These systems assume that musical structure is built from discrete fixed pitches, but in Hindustani music, we know from the very first mean that assumption breaks down. When we try to capture sound directly from music information retrieval, we get the opposite problem. Too much information, too much data, without a clear unit of analysis or way to interpret large-scale structure. We see everything, but cannot yet interpret it. And in the Goldilocks structure, I'd like to suggest or offer or promise that the IDTAP represents a modality in between, a representation that preserves movements while making it legible. Its central premise is simple. The basic unit of musical structure is not the note, but movement. By transcribing sound as trajectories rather than discrete pitches, it allows us to track relational motion over time. Crucially, it also enables us to annotate and segment these movements into analyzable units, syllables, phrases, gestures, articulations. In other words, it renders musical movement analytically tractable. So I'm just going to play 2 seconds of Begum Akhtar singing. We know this piece. If we ask a MIDI structure to play a faithful staff notation, it'll sound ridiculous. And then here is a rendition, a synthesis of my transcription. Okay, so with this in mind, we turn to the oral archive to analyze the forms of reasoning unfolding within speech and performance. I begin with recording of Musharraf Khan's son, Sadiq Ali Khan, from a 1963 Sangeet Natak Academy studio performance in Delhi. He opens with a brief but striking spoken introduction, where he positions his genealogy outside the literary traditions of the Mughal Kalavants, as well as the Sanskrit Shastras, yet squarely within their oral epistemological worlds. Let's listen.
दरबारी कानरा बजाऊंगा। इसका असली नाम तो है कानरा, लेकिन चूंकि अकबर जलालुद्दीन अकबर उसको अपने दरबार में बहुत ज़्यादा सुना करते थे, इस वजह से इसका नाम दरबारी कानरा हुआ। आरोही अवरोही जो है इसकी गंधार आंदोलन और दैवत आंदोलन, लिहाजा 2 विषय हैं इस मामले में, इल्म और अमल। इल्म है किताब में और अमल है करने में। अब वो आंदोलन गंधार क्या चीज़ है वो बगैर बजाए या गाए समझ में नहीं आ सकती। लिखने को लिखा हुआ है, लेकिन अगर विद्यार्थी के सामने वो रख दी जाए कि आंदोलन गंधार और दैवत लगाओ, वो नहीं लगा सकेगा, बल्कि अच्छा सा पंडित नहीं लगा सकेगा। ता वक्त के सीखे नहीं कि आंदोलन गंधार और दैवत क्या है। आरोही इसका काफी का ठाट है, लेकिन गंधार और दैवत जो है वो बड़ी अहम चीज़ है। लिहाजा वो सुनने से ही पता चलेगा क्या चीज़ है वो। मैं शुरू करता हूँ दरबारी कांडा। मैं दरबारी
So Sadiq Ali Khan introduces the rag in order to deconstruct its name. Darbari Kannada is associated with Akbar's court and attributed to Tansen. But for Sadiq Ali Khan, Darbari rests on an older foundation, Kannada, and only becomes Darbari through repeated performance in Akbar's court. What we hear then is an act of oral philology, linking contemporary practice to a pre-Mughal past. But as his remarks unfold, it becomes clear that he's not merely revising history, but asserting an alternative epistemology. This becomes especially clear when, after his opening, a Sangeet Natak Academy representative poses a familiar question about the rag's ascending and descending lines. the very terms through which rags were discussed by musicians at the All India Music Conference. Sadiq Ali Khan's response is forcefully dismissive, but not of musicological topics. Rather, he shifts the ground of discussion itself. He begins by situating Darbari within a tat framework, but placing it in the kafi rather than Bhatkhande's Asavri tat. He then moves to a sustained meditation, indeed a polemic, on the Andolan of Darbari. For Sadiq Ali Khan, these concepts, Arohi, Avrohi, Tat, Andolan, are vital, but they do not exist as independent, disaggregated atoms. They exist in sound and in motion. He makes this explicit when he frames Andolan through a contrast between ilm and amal, knowledge and action. In Islamic thought, the goal is to unite them, but here he presents them as fundamentally unassimilable. The Andolan may be described in books, but it cannot be realized through them. When one asks the trained Vidyarthi or the learned Pandit to perform it, they cannot. I read Sadiq Ali Khan as offering not a sectarian critique, but an epistemological one. By invoking Pandit and Vidyarthi alongside ilm, he folds Brahmanical and Islamic traditions into a single argument, one in which scriptural knowledge mistakes definition for comprehension. And crucially, he does not reject Indic theory. The concept he centers, Andolan, is unambiguously rooted in the Sanskritic aesthetic universe. But here the concept is animated through an oral and performative register. And this is what I mean by oral scholasticism. Not the absence of research, but its realization in and through sound. As Sadiq Ali Khan was a participant at the All India Music Conferences, his position helps us understand those debates, but we cannot view his stance as a simple continuation or recovery of them. Rather, the recording marks an oral intersection where musicological inquiry and musical practice encounter one another, but do not operate on the same terms. In this sense, the oral archive does not simply extend musicological inquiry, it reveals a parallel genealogy in which theoretical concepts are developed, tested, and transformed by professional musicians within pedagogy, practice, and performance. With this in mind, we turn to another inheritor of this world, Vilayat Khan, whose father and grandfather were also important participants in the conference. And I'll try to, actually I have some time. For Vilayat Khan, Shruti and Andolan are not discrete classificatory categories. They are articulated through the concept of Ang and Chalan. He too engages rag families, but where the All India Music Conference minutes linger on varieties, which later formalize into tats, he moves to another system, the system of angs. For him, an ang is a phrase that travels across rags like a melodic gene. It does not define a rag, but carries a recognizable musical inheritance, a morphemic imprint through which rags can be heard, studied, and conceptualized in relation, even across scalar frameworks. In the next example, he sings Kannada not as a rag, as Sadiq Ali Khan did, but as an ang, anchored in the phrase ma pa ga. In each instance, he renders komal ga with different shrutis and distinct andolan. To demonstrate the ang, he first moves through the shrutis between swaras. The key point, as with Sadiq Ali Khan, is that these concepts are not treated as independent identities.
This Jaunpuri is re re ma ma pa pa ga ma pa ga Darbari ma pa ga Bageshwari ma pa ga Bahar. So all these gandhas,
It's the same phrase.
It's the same phrase.
Just
but
because he's using it in a different piece.
So what emerges here is a different kind of system. The pitch material remains constant, but identity shifts through Andolan, Shruti inflection and the movement of the phrase itself. Crucially, the rags he demonstrates, Darbari, Jaunpuri, Bageshwari, and Bahar, belong to different scalar lineages. While all share the Kannada genetic cell, they diverge in their treatment of Daivad, Komal in the first pair, and Tivra in the other. So rag identity here is not scalar, it's relational and mobile, articulated through the logic of Ang. This becomes even clearer in his discussion of Puriya Kalyan. For Vilayat Khan, Kalyan is not a rag name, but also an Ang. anchored here in the phrase pa magare, in which re and ga must be tivra. Since the rag in question contains neither the characteristic phrase nor tivra re, it cannot, according to Khan Sahib, be Purya Kalyan. This is why, as he explains, his elders called it Purva. And let's listen to him.
The first time I have heard Purva, so-called Purya Kalyan these days, from Ustad Ashik Ali Khan Sahib, I liked it very much. Then with my curiosity, I asked Bundu Khan Sahib the next day, Bundu Khan Sahib, I will call Mamu. And I would respect him as my Ustad, as my Mama, as my elder, as my master. And I like that. So he said that Purva is very easy. You know Purya Dhanashwari? I said, yes. So he said that it is like a Purya Dhanashwari, but it is used Tivra Dhaivad. I said, yes, very good. And when you use Tivra Dhaivad, then if you abolish, don't use Pancham, only use instead of Komal Dhaivad, Tivra Dhaivad, then what it will become? I said, then it will become Purya. Okay. If you use Pancham in Purya, then it is Purva. After so many years, I don't know why people started saying Purya Kalyan. In Purya Kalyan, there is no Kalyan. Kalyan is a particular ang, particular use in any rag. Kanra is a particular use of few. The first time I have.
So, through Bundu Khan Sahib, Vilayat Khan receives a dialogic lesson in rag identity as relational adjustment. Modify Purya Dhanashri, it becomes Purva. Modify Purva, it becomes Purya. This logic does not expand into a full modal system as the Tott framework does, nor does it aim at universal taxonomic reach. Its reasoning is local and relational. A second principle follows, at least for Vilayat Khan Sahib. If a rag invokes an ang, it must realize it in sound. Purya Kalyan names Kalyan and so carries that demand. But since the ang is not present, the rag does not hold. The result is a kind of negative proof. The rag fails to live up to its own name. And it is precisely at this point that we come to our final case study, that of Bari Ghulam Ali Khan. He enters our story not to dispute Vilayat Khan per se, but to offer a very different epistemological horizon. In a private concert from the mid-20th century, Bari Ghulam Ali Khan offers one of the most extraordinary renderings of Purya Kalyan I've ever encountered. He opens the performance with a disarming provocation. Purya and then Kalyan, is there a meaningful pathway between the two? So let's hear his provocation, and then we'll conclude this with a reading of his performance.
मैं गाने लगा हूँ पूरिया कल्याण, पूरिया और फिर कल्याण, कुछ मायना रखता है बात। अगर पूरिया में रिखत दे के हम पूरिये की तरह गाए, तो फिर क्या पंचम से कल्याण होता है? पंचम किसी वक्त छोड़ भी देते हैं करने वाले लोग। अच्छा, उसको भी जाने दो। पूरिया की चाल कल्याण में गाओ, तब पूरिया कल्याण गाओ। और जो वैसे गाना तो मैं तो नहीं मानूंगा। कल्याण में रिखत की सूरत हम दिखाएंगे, कैसे जैसे पूरिया में लगता है वैसे कल्याण में कैसे लगता है।
What he proceeds to do in performance is nothing short of aesthetic engineering at its most daring. Treating Gade Sa as a potential bridge between two rag worlds, Purya and Kalyan, he constructs a passage where none had existed, using Tivra Re rather than the expected Komal Re. But even here, resolution is deferred in motion. Through the transcription, we can see how he treats Re differently. At times, he bypasses it with the meaned from Ga to Sa. At other times, he flickers on Tivra Re, and at other times, he lands on it directly. Meanwhile, the absent Komal Re, introduced only in the Drut section, shapes the entire Vilambit as an expectation, almost audible in its absence. His question, commentary, and performance form a single argumentative chain, culminating in his declaration. Puriya Kalyan is only born when the chal of Puriya merges with the chal of Kalyan. Let's now watch this unfold in real time through the transcription. You can actually go on YouTube and listen to the entire performance. It's exceptional. But now that we've heard it, we can return to this image and see these as four distinct modalities: bypass, glide, inflection, and event. These are not different notes. They are different ways of inhabiting a note in motion. Each reconfigures the listener's sense of the bridge, showing that rag identity resides not in the note itself, but in the relational logic of its pathways. Only in the drut does he render komal re. So within a single performance, he holds together two scalar logics drawn from opposite ends of the taxonomic system. The rag is not a fixed object for him, but a field of movement capable of holding multiple, even contradictory essences at once. Komal re and tivra re here are co-present possibilities within an unfolding path. Taken together, these three musicians show that the oral tradition is not an anti-theoretical residue of pre-modern practice. It is a contemporary, dynamic site of oral scholasticism. By engaging the oral archive, we encounter not just lost knowledge, but a living epistemology, plural, relational, and argued through sound. For these musicians, theory may be peripheral, but theorizing is central. It does not precede sound, it unfolds within it. For much of the 20th and 21st century, our methods have been misaligned with our object of study. We have either too little structure or too much data. With tools that begin to align inscription with sound, we are now in a position to change that. The task then is not simply to recover or appreciate this archive. It is to develop forms of inquiry capable of doing justice to it, to treat musical performance not as material to be described, but as thought itself. And thank you.
As we have Professor Daniel Neuman as discussant, I might sound a little emotional, but indeed this is a very emotional moment for us. Just as the sun needs no introduction, such is the eminence of Professor Daniel M. Neuman. And what makes this moment even more special is, despite being in an online space, his presence transcends all distance and reaches us with the same warmth and inspiration. Sir, it's truly a moment of deep honor and heartfelt joy for us to have you here today. Even across screens and time zones, your presence feels close, guiding, and deeply meaningful to all of us who gathered here. We genuinely feel blessed to have you joined us, sir. Your work has illuminated paths for generations of scholars and musicians, and today, through this virtual platform, the light continues to inspire each one of us. As I said, he needs no introduction, yet it is my privilege to briefly reflect upon his extraordinary journey. A distinguished ethnomusicologist, he is widely recognized for his leadership and scholarship, notably serving as Executive Vice Chancellor and Provost at the University of California, Los Angeles, Interim Director, UCLA, Herb Alpert School of Music, Chief Executive Officer and Executive Director, New Center for Arts and Culture, Boston. His research focuses on the social organization of Hindustani classical music and the ethnography of Indian music culture. He also pioneered digital humanities projects, including Atlas of World Music and the World Music Navigator. I know we all are very eager to listen to this legend. So I take this privilege to invite most respected Professor Daniel M. Neuman to kindly share his remarks. And it's actually a very extraordinary moment to witness the wisdom of two generations of the same gharana as Professor Dad told us. And this was a brilliant idea of Professor Sanjay Bandyopadhyay to bring all three of them together. So I welcome Professor Neuman again. Sir, we are here to listen to you.
Thank you for those very kind words. I really appreciate them. I also appreciate Sanjay's invitation as well. And it's a great honor for me to be here. In the interest of full disclosure, you know already that Dart is my son, but Stefan Fiol is the grandson of my own guru in ethnomusicology, the late Professor Bruno Nettle. So it is one big family, in case that wasn't clear in the earlier introductions. Having confessed, allow me to celebrate the excellence of both these outstanding papers, each the result of many years of research, with a few words about what makes their contributions notable and how they intersect with one another. I will be reiterating some things because I think sometimes it's good to underline through a different interpretation what has been said. In Dart's paper, the focus is on epistemology. What is knowledge and how do we come to know something? Oral scholasticism is offered as a fundamental alternative to both the theory-practice binary and the implicit theory assumption. Instead, what hereditary musicians do when they speak before singing or playing is explicit theorizing. And performance is not merely evidence of theory. Performance is itself the site of theory. That distinction is central to his paper. He opens, as we've heard, with a scene at the 1916 All India Music Conference. The Kirudin, asked to demonstrate Shruti in a calibrated harmonium, Mr. Clements, refuses the instrument and relocates the demonstration to voice, hand, and ear. That gesture, the musician's relocation of research from inscribed measurement to the hereditary body, sets the terms for everything that follows. The three ustads at the center of his paper are heirs to that moment. Dart draws primarily on three pieces of recorded material: the 63 studio recording of Sadiq Ali Khan, the commentary of Vilayat Khan on Puriya Kalyan, and the private concert recording of Bari Ghulam Ali Khan. These are not novel recordings, but what is original is their treatment. The paper takes the recorded speaking voices of the ustads sitting inside their performances as primary analytical evidence. The brief introductions musicians gave before they sang are read as theoretical statements, and the performances themselves are then analyzed for how the theoretical statement is worked out in sound. That double reading, speech and music, with the ID tap transcriptions of the performance used to show what the speech is describing, is an original methodological move. The actual musical elements, Andulan for Sadiq Ali Khan, Ang Chalan for Vilayat Khan, and the Chal for Bari Ghulam Ali Khan, each is a way of knowing with respect to the ontological basis of a rag. Dart's paper does not claim these are the only ways, rather these are given as an entry into a much larger field of inquiry. What's original here is not the identification of the terms, they appear throughout Hindustani discourse, but the comparative treatment of three related but distinct epistemic horizons articulated by three ustads across the same half-century, all oriented by a common underlying commitment to rag identity as dynamic rather than categorical, and that is very important. This is quite distinct from the usual discourse concerning what makes a given raga unique. I was going to say a little about the ITAP framing. I'm going to skip that because it's getting late and I don't want Stefan to fall asleep. It's, I think, very, very late there and getting late here. But taken together, the paper's originality is the conversion of a category, oral scholasticism, into a reading practice, speech and music in the oral archive, all into a comparative analytical frame, the three horizons, if I can put it that way, of kinetic RAG identity, into a methodological diagnosis. We'll call that the Goldilocks problem. Each move builds on the previous one, and the argument accumulates rather than being assembled laterally. Read together, Dard's analysis and Fio's ethnography document an ongoing tradition of hereditary theorizing that moves through different forms and different registers. This framing makes the two papers complementary rather than structurally parallel and keeps each on its own ground. Dard's is a historical archival argument and a methodological platform for engaging that archive. Stefan Fio's is an ethnographic political argument and an analysis of a contest over stewardship. They meet in their shared refusal to treat hereditary musicians as anything less than theorizing subjects. Thank you.